Welcome to Justice Conversation. This podcast series brings together people who discuss holistic justice from different perspectives.
Hi, my name is Filipos Haile Mikael, and I'm a resident of Bay Area in California. My mother tongue language is Tigrinya. Most of my perspective I share on this project will come from the Tigrinya culture and the norms where I grew up. For our listeners' information, Tigrinya is Afro-Asiatic language family. It's commonly spoken in Eritrea and the northern Ethiopia Tigray region.
I'm Kim, and I'm from the United States. I started the Justice Conversation website to contribute to a shift in cultural understanding from punitive to relationship-centered justice.
We welcome others to join and share in our conversation. In today's podcast, we will begin a series of conversation on our different justice system and what role love and opening up plays in them. So we have how many examples? Like 10? Yeah.
Well, first of all, usually if you say justice system, a listener thinks of something run by the government. So it might be a combination of the municipal courts, the police officers, the jails, the state-run prison system, and including all of the lawyers and court staff, and then on into the federal justice system. I think usually when people say or hear the phrase justice system, they're thinking of that formal governmental system. When I began the artwork on justice, I started to rethink what a justice system really was, and to realize that the government system is just one justice system. But we actually live by a lot of different justice systems in our lives. And so just to list some of them that we could talk about in this podcast series, these other justice systems include family, school, workplace, neighborhood, organizations, religions. There's also an informal justice system in our social behaviors, and there's an environmental justice system in the interactions we have with nature and our planet, as well as the atmosphere we build around ourselves.
And within the self.
And within the self, you're right.
Fundamentally, yeah. I start with justice system from ourselves. This is the foundational justice system. The listener might think that's absurd, or what kind of nonsense conversation is this? But fundamentally, if we don't exercise justice within ourselves, it is very difficult to extend to others, to family, to anybody. So how do I practice justice within myself? As we frame it from this podcast, from the premise that the law is love. If we love ourselves, we can be just to ourselves. We might think loving yourself might look like you are being selfish, but the opposite is true. Given all the marketing scheme, the voice of the advertisers, I don't think we love ourselves. That's the fundamental understanding I receive. When I go to store, the things they try to sell me tell me I'm not good enough. Instead of loving yourself the way you are, you need this kind of clothing, tool, or accessory to look cool, strong, young, etc. The consumerism worldview is not helping us in bringing justice to ourselves. In our first introductory podcast, I talked about justice as opening up. With this concept in mind, when you love yourself the way you are, if you practice justice within yourself, you unlock and open up. Justice within yourself gives you an opening capacity. It gives you unlocking capacity. So fundamentally, if you unlock yourself, of course, that will extend to everyone else, like family, school, workspace, organization, religion, all in all. We can do that.
I think you made an excellent point to begin this conversation by talking about the justice system within the self, and that the evidence seems to show that the general individual is not very good at loving themselves. There's a body of artwork that I did called Opening the Door, where each figure has found a door in their torso and they've opened it up. And I think of these pieces every time you talk about unlocking and opening up. In the artwork, what the figures find when they open up their torsos is that all of this mess spills out, which I illustrate with different symbolic images. Some of the objects represent something sacred, and some represent things seen as wrong, negative, profane perhaps, or judged as such. For example, some symbols represent addictions or violence or black and white thinking, and others represent nourishment, rootedness, or spiritual opening. And this is all in the shadow, right? You have to look at what's in there. It's all stuff you're ashamed of, including the sacred, and start to integrate and accept that before you can get to the point of loving yourself. The famous psychiatrist C.J. Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. One of the really big problems we have with justice is our own projections. They're what we tuck away and won't look at, and then put out onto other people like a scapegoat. People are often cruel to others because of their own projections. And so in order to have actual justice based on love, we need to start with that internal self and the way we judge what we find acceptable to show others and what we hide from others and from ourselves. If we have a cultural practice that finds it acceptable to, as you say, unlock and open up and look at what this mess inside is, then we can begin to consciously work on the relationship with ourselves and others. This is a critical step in carrying out justice in our world. And I just realized that the way I described what's inside was a negative judgment. I called it a mess. But this glorious, beautiful stuff that's inside that we're ashamed of and keep hidden is also the basis of our own creativity, which, as we talked about in our last episode, is the basis of our freedom. So if we want justice and freedom and creativity, yes, unlock and open up. It's in yourself, and you need to look at what's really there.
Wow, that's a good discussion point for today. Why don't we have a conversation based on the art that you made? One fruit of justice is art.
Sure, I'd love to talk about the Opening the Door artwork. I also want to caution people thinking about creativity and justice to not hold the definition of art or creativity too rigidly. Don't just picture a painting or dance or music. You know, it could be how you design a city or a lesson plan or treat a patient or how you decide to work with your children who are fighting today. All of this can be viewed within the context of art and creativity.
Let's take a look, the opening the door catalog of the artwork you made. For me, justice literally means opening up. In Tigrinya, the language that I speak, I see this art you did opening the door, which I think you did in 2017. Is correct? We can have a conversation and I have my perspective and you can give me your explanation.
I think that sounds wonderful. When I created this artwork, I was working on justice, although I think most people wouldn't understand it that way. It doesn't look like what I think most people expect to see from justice artwork. These pieces almost look meditative, except for some of the symbols that are coming out of them. Some of them are kind of disturbing. The work isn't as peaceful or easy as it might look at first glance. But if you open the door of your inner self, you're going to find all sorts of things relating to memories or things that you do or things that you react to. Those things, if you don't look at them, then they turn into projections or they wind up things that you build walls to protect. Then between the projections and the walls come a lot of our outer injustices in the world. Many injustices are based on these projections, as well as the separations that people build in order to prevent others from seeing what's within them, or even prevent themselves from seeing what's within them.
I see this justice within as a first justice we should attend to. Once we explore justice within, we can extend it to family and society at large. When I look at the first picture, I see the hand. The hand is, for me, a symbol of work. Justice is work. This justice work starts within. The hand which have opened the door are the work of justice starting. And the open door gives me feeling of possibility. Can you open up yourself? Of course, to open up yourself, you need to have certain love, and the art you made shows an opening up. And at the heart is a symbol of love and means a relationship. If you see one of the hand, it is in the dark. Darkness is often understood as bad or negative, even evil. But I see darkness in many African traditions as the unmanifested God. I don't see darkness in black as the negative, but perhaps it is something that we need to know that was inside us that we are invited to explore.
The figures are outlined in black sumi ink, and also the cavity within their torso is painted in the black sumi ink as well. The shadow around the figures actually wasn't planned. When the woodcuts were first printed, the figures didn't show up distinctly unless the shadow was painted around them. So that was a time when the creative process brought a meaning to the pieces that was needed, but which I hadn't planned or hadn't consciously chosen. The artwork sort of demanded what it needed. But I also love what you brought up about darkness as God not yet manifested. The symbols associated with the shadow do depict difficult things, but also the sacred. I think we neglect this knowledge. The shadow can be the holy darkness. It can represent the creative space of the unknown, the primordial darkness from which all creation comes. When we suppress the hidden material from within, we allow injustice to ourselves and others. The things that we try not to see in ourselves are things that we judge to be negative or harmful or shameful, but also we judge the parts of our sacred selves to not be acceptable too. And sometimes what we think is negative or shameful is actually part of the sacred self. Gradually teasing out how to live with and be transparent with these allows you to realize your most important work and the truest aspects of yourself.
Yeah, I learned the idea of darkness from the Oromo Gada ethnic group in Ethiopia. On their flag, there is one black stripe. I was wondering what it represents, and I was expecting it to mean African darkness, or having black skin. But to my surprise, black on their flag represents the unmanifested divine, or unmanifested God. I thought, wow, this is something I never learned about. So moving forward, you related this artwork with the shadow work. There is also another good point that I am learning, of course. Some psychologists like Jung wrote extensively about it. Let's look at the snake charmer. So that's interesting. I want to hear more.
Oh, but if I say first what I had in mind when I made the artwork, then it will change your perceptions.
Shall I go ahead with that?
Yeah.
What it means for me?
Please.
So speaking through symbolism, I see the snake or serpent is like Jesus said to be wise like a serpent and innocent like a dove. So in the work of justice, most often we focus on the dove, which is about bringing peace and connecting people. But we can't forget the snake. Snake for me is the understanding of what many writers are calling reptilian mind. Reptilian mind in all of us. It is our evolutionary process. It is a fight or flight response. When you meet a snake, either you run or you kill it. But if your mind is at another level, you try a different way to work out your difference and learn to live together. At one point, it was useful to kill the snake. But that's not the end of the conversation with us. Fight or flight has been the way people have understood justice for thousands of years. I fight and I win or lose. I flee, stay hidden and lose freedom. But we can move out of our reptilian mind into different practice of and both, where you look for a way in which everyone is celebrated.
And both. Yes, that's so important.
So, what does this figure who's holding the snake do with the reptilian mind and the work of justice? That was how I see. Did you work your way out of your reptilian mind? Do I have at least a conscious, deliberate understanding of the snake in the hand? Can I charm it? Can I understand it? Can I work it out? This is the process of shadow working. Can I grow it instead of denying it? A lot of people are scared of the snake. They say, no, no, no. I don't have a snake in me, or there is no snake in my group, or in my religion, or in my country. But whoever you are, you need to say, I do have a snake. I need to address that. That is very helpful to my growth and to my community growth and to the growth of everybody. This growth is a work of justice. This is a work of justice and healing. It is why the snake is a symbol of medicine too. It's like making antivenom from the snake within you. You get your own medicine. That's how I see it.
The medical association of the snake with healing stems from the book of Numbers, where the Jewish people in the desert have been complaining about the food and the lack of water and about wandering around for so long and not having a home yet. And the serpents started to show up and bite the people, and some were dying. Moses asked God what to do, and he was told to make a bronze sculpture of a serpent on a staff and raise it up for people to look at, and that anybody who had been bitten or who gazed on the bronze serpent would be healed. And that's why the image of the staff with the serpent is a medical symbol. And here in this piece, the man is holding a poisonous snake, a viper, in his hand. A snake charmer is someone who plays music for a snake, and the snake moves and sways but doesn't strike. There is more to it than that. The music doesn't really keep the snake from striking, but the illusion is that the music hypnotizes the snake to do whatever the charmer wants it to do. When I made this, I was thinking of how people make their words pleasing, like music, telling others what they want to hear in order to cause a certain outcome. For example, to sell something. The desired outcome is not necessarily what's in the best interest of others. The snake charmer thinks it's good for the snake charmer, but it doesn't have any basis in real connection or healthy relationship. I saw the snake charmer fairly negatively when I was making it. In his other symbols, he's holding the egg that's been broken open from the outside before the bird was developed enough to hatch and live. It doesn't bother the snake charmer if another being is destroyed for his gain. There's the symbol of the hemlock in this piece, a poison. The black widow spider is another poison. The trophy cup, which is a prize, is turned upside down, as is the bowl. Even the prize isn't valued. There is no offering, no sense of fulfillment. The only positive symbol that I really see in this is the salt. The person can have a lot of personality, a lot of flavor, add a lot of flavor to the conversations and gatherings. In the rest of these, there's more of a blend of imagery that symbolizes things commonly thought of as positive and commonly thought of as negative. But in this piece, I was frustrated with people who are trying to sell things irrespective of whether what they're doing is harmful. And I guess I failed to include some more positive symbols.
Yeah, I can see it from that perspective now too. That sense is very toxic and poisonous. But on the other side, we have a poison to deal with too. In each of us is my message. The animosity of the snake is present. It is here before us now. And it's actually a gift. So when we are young children, our first time gazing at the snake, we can see it with innocence. We are not afraid of it. We learn over time to become afraid, ashamed. When we are older, gazing at the snake, it is all about awareness. When you are give enough attention, then you find the medicine you most need for your healing. to do the work of justice. It is look at the snake within you.
Yes, I agree with that.
I have a question for you. What does the snake charmer have to do with justice conversation for you?
Well, when I made the work in the series, I was looking at what has to be dealt with within the self so that it isn't acted out in the community or society as an unjust or harmful action. Even the person trying to sell something unnecessary or harmful, if we didn't have the snake within us, we couldn't be charmed into buying it, right? We wouldn't go in that direction no matter how sweet or musical the snake charmer's words sounded. So it is that snake within us that allows us to be led en masse in healthy directions.
Yeah, I hear you. In addition to charming, he's exposing the snake within us.
Yeah, and then there's something that I've learned recently. It didn't figure into the creation of this piece, but I think it's really interesting. Earlier, you brought up the wise as serpents and innocent as dove quote from the gospel. I was reading a reflection on that recently by somebody who commented on how sensitive the snake is, that its whole body is like a sensory organ. I didn't realize that snakes were that sensitive, but it does make some sense. All its movement is along the ground. Its body is in contact with the surface that it's moving along, and that sense of touch with its surroundings is heightened. And if you think of taking in all of the information around you in a very sensitive way, that gives a whole different perspective on what a serpent is or what it symbolizes. I haven't finished unpacking that one. It offers a lot of additional meaning.
Yeah, how beautiful that is. It gives us the pragmatics of it. When you do the work of justice within our service instead of living away from the ground. Living on the ground is the most important thing. So I think we have said a lot about this. That's a very good, insightful point, and I like it.
Okay, should we go on to the next one?
Yeah.
This one is the prize winner. What do you think of the prize winner, Filipos?
Yeah, I see in the picture is the prize, the cup. Is that right?
Yeah, it can be a cup, a chalice, or a trophy. It's a trophy cup or a trophy chalice.
So my question is, what is the prize? The prize is what I'm gonna get from making justice within myself. When I open up, am I rewarded? When you open up, you became vulnerable. Being vulnerable, we might be understood by society, or we might not be understood, but it is still the work of justice. We have to do it regardless of the outcome. Regardless whether we receive a prize, we might not receive understanding and connection.
We might not be rewarded if our doors are open but others' doors are closed.
Since we are interdependent, justice within the self cannot be the end in itself. It is for sharing with others. If justice is stopped within the self and is not extended to others, it can be poisonous thing. This can be like a poisonous chalice. We can drink it thinking the prize is for myself only. And by doing that, we can abstract justice for others.
That's seeing the prize as something that can be positive or negative. I had a sense of both while working on this piece too. One side is to be motivated to action by having ambition and goals, yet going after certain objects is often superficial. I've noticed myself and other parents playing into this a lot while raising children. We offer prizes to accomplish tasks. Like we might say, if you do this, you get a little Matchbox car. The little toy doesn't mean much to us as parents, but the child gets excited and they do what they need to do to get that prize. We put incentive systems in place in our schools, in our families, and our workplaces. Many of our kids and even many adults choose their actions based on such incentives. There are some who want nothing to do with it, but a lot of people do respond to it. As we get older, the goals get bigger and the prizes more consequential. Sometimes the prizes are very useful, and sometimes they may cost us more than what we think they do, or they even wind up being dangerous. Let's say you're a professor and your goal is to have tenure. That's job security, and that's respect. And there are all sorts of reasons why society respects the goal of working towards tenure. At the same time, what compromises are made in a person's life in order to achieve this? And are those worth the costs? The answer is different for each life in which the tenure position was a prize that was sought. I just gave one example, but most careers have prizes like that. They drive people to the top of their career and the top of their abilities.
So how about if we say every goal, every achievement, every success have its own injustice? We need to look at it from the cost perspective. We have to address the cost from the narrative of justice.
I agree with that in part. I don't know if it's true to say that every goal has an injustice, but certainly the choices that we make have a cost. If you choose something, then you didn't choose something else. And what was the thing you didn't choose? And what was the value of what you didn't choose? I agree that we need to look at which choice leads to the most wholeness in relationship. And that might be with the self or with the family, the community, or even with the world. The path that leads towards the most wholeness in relationship is the most just choice. But it isn't always an easy thing to determine.
Yeah, to see wholeness in relationship is not an easy choice. To live in ambiguity is a part of being human. From that ambiguity, we step in to examine our life. Socrates says, quote, "An examined life is not worth living," end quote. Deciding between one path over the other path is often not an easy choice.
There's one other story symbol I want to bring up about this piece, and that is the Holy Grail legend. It's an archetypal story about a knight or a hero who seeks the Grail. The hero encounters trials as he goes through the kingdom, which is a wasteland. He comes to the Fisher King, who is wounded. The land is waste because of the king's wound. The hero is supposed to ask the king certain questions, such as, whom does the Grail serve and what ails you? But he doesn't ask because he fears they would be rude, and the king and palace and Grail disappear, and he winds up back in the wasteland. He goes through trials, and when he's able to return to the king and has learned that he should ask the questions, the king is healed and the land is restored and bountiful. The chalice, the prize cup in this piece, seems to me to fit with the Grail legend and with seeking justice. Asking the questions to understand where harm is and how justice is served can help with healing and making a bountiful, prosperous community. If one doesn't ask the questions, there will be many trials until one does. But here's a question. Is the Grail a shiny gold fancy cup, or is it a simple cup like the one off on the corner by her knee, which contains a crocus flower?
Oh, that's a good point. So that little cup, the little flower growing up out there, that is the trajectory, the direction of justice within, not the trophy. So searching for Holy Grail, we do encounter dangers.
Maybe as a journey that we're all on, though, we're all our own hero in that Holy Grail story.
Yes, I see the work of justice in a small cup that it gives us a flower.
The particular flower coming out of the cup is a crocus, and the flower from which we get saffron, which is an extremely valuable spice.
Okay, good. The difference between the two cups suggested to me the true self and the false self. The cup within the saffron flower is at the end of the true self journey. The trophy cup is the false thing that we try to get to compensate for our detachment. We are often driven. That doesn't mean it bad by itself, but we should be attentive not to work against justice in our lives. The true self always gives us the justice we need. It keeps us open for new possibility, new vision.
Hear, hear. Next, let's look at the controller.
In this piece, where the woman is holding the remote control, to see and understanding justice from an objective perspective is like that remote control. It lacks subjectivity. With justice, you have to feel it. You have to live it. You have to start with it instead of having it given to you or explain it to you. Justice has to be within. And that remote control, in other words, controls from outside forces. And one thing that has misguided us, it represents times when we seek justice from the other party and moves from subjectivity to objective ideas such as rules in a law books. I don't mean it to be negative about objectivity, but we have to see justice happen within. We need to have a lived experience of justice.
That's a great interpretation of the remote control. It wasn't the reason I put it there, but if people don't bring their own interpretation to the art doesn't live. I love your interpretation of the remote control. When I put it there, I was thinking of times when people have a need to control the situation or environment. To some extent, some control over what's happening around you is necessary, but it can easily go overboard and create problems for you and the people around you. So for me, the remote control represents an obsession a person might have for control. And the knife is, in the other hand...
I have a perspective of that knife.
Go ahead.
So a lot of time we see punishment as justice. But when we punish ourselves, it's really self-hate. Let's say I have a bad addiction and I think of that as a sin and I'm ashamed. So I punish myself because I'm doing this thing. You remember that in the past, people used to torture themselves. What they call it self-flagellation for the thing they did wrong. This is not justice. We are here to love ourselves and to love our individuality. If the law is love and the justice is about love, then we need to love the individual within ourselves. We don't need to carry knife to use on ourselves. So oftentimes, what we experience in ourselves, we extend it to others. So I see self-hate represented by a knife. I don't know if it is your interpretation like that.
Yeah, it's very similar. For me, it represented the tendency to attack the self within, to have an aspect of the self that you actually want to destroy or kill because you judge it to be unacceptable. Maybe it embarrasses you or it hurts others or some other reason, so you go after it. Also on this piece are the locusts on the thighs and the shoulder, and they're similar. They're like the eating out of the self. They destroy what is nourishing. But there are also positive symbols in this too. It's not all about the really scary stuff. In the piece is also the carrot, which is nourishing and rooted, a favorite vegetable for many. And our roots are so important. The raspberries, what a lush, amazing fruit. They are full of delicious, juicy, and delectable.
Yeah, I see. The bird is a dove. So, in general perception, a dove is about peace or tranquility. And we actually say justice is peace. And I see there is also fake peace at the expense of justice, where we are shutting up somebody, silencing them. Some people understand this is as securing the peace, but fundamentally we lock somebody up in the name of fake peace, and we call it justice. By locking them up, we have removed the message of actual justice. Doing this makes what we call justice unjust. What we need to do is understand and accept that the process of working out the cause of injustice can be messy, it can be scary, it can be the way you portrayed in the picture. But we shouldn't be intimidated by that. So we each need to question what kind of peace do we have. Often the peace we have is at the expenses of injustice, at the expenses of opening up. Instead, our response often is to close the door.
That's interesting. I'm noticing something right now that wasn't done consciously when I made the work. The remote control in this piece is slightly over the dove's head. And as I think about your point about the false sense of peace, I'm thinking that comes from a certain kind of control, from repression. Repression says, be quiet, right? The leaders don't want to deal with the dissent. They try to force people to be quiet. And if they succeed, they call that peaceful. They're really just in denial. The remote control looming over the head and even obscuring part of the head of the dove seems to be representing that. What happens within us that is similar to this? We try to control things in our lives at the expense of dealing with our own messiness. And thus, we don't have peace within ourselves. Our inner process with ourselves is not just.
You say repression says, be quiet. It reminds me of the experience I have from back home in Eritrea, how they control dissent. We were told to be quiet all the time. I do like to talk about that, but I think we done enough for today. That can be a future conversation.
Yes, I'd like to hear more about your time growing up in Eritrea. Another conversation on that would be great. Today, we've covered a lot of in-depth material.
Let's talk about the rest of the artwork in the next conversation.
Looking forward to it. We'll talk soon. This podcast has been produced by Philippos Helmichael and Kim Vander Heiden for the Justice Conversation Project, all rights reserved.
We encourage sharing this information in educational setting for the purpose having more conversation about justice, love, and unlocking our interrelationship with each other.
Join us for more podcasts on justiceconversation.com.